Hey guys, I have Name248 here, and it's been a while since I've done anything with Chips Challenge, hasn't it? I'm just going to start going through this while I explain what it is I'm going through. But this is Micro CCLP2. This is a set created by Josh Lee, and about a month ago, throughout the end of January, I optimized the entire set and set or matched or beat the record on all 149 levels according to PyGuy's site. I'm certain there's room for improvement on several of these routes, but this is what I came up with, and I'm quite happy with it. I'll be calling out every level I improved the record on as I show it, and why am I doing this? Well, the main reason I'm showing all of these routes is because Chips Challenge optimization is really interesting, but a lot of really cool routes just never really get shown, right? Because everybody kind of keeps the routes hidden because that's where the competition is. And for the official sets, that makes a lot of sense. And for custom sets, it also makes a lot of sense. Also, this level's busted. Um, but yeah, for custom levels, it also makes a lot of sense to withhold, just because those levels might become official levels someday. But with something like Micro CCLP2, you know they're not going to be. Now this is fixing the toggle switch. Fixing the toggle switch was one of the first levels that actually took me an embarrassingly long time to find that route for. It's not a terribly complicated route, but it's just the things I kept trying were not that. I was overthinking it. In fact, that was a pretty common trend for Micro CCLP2, where I would just overthink the route for a level because I was trying to incorporate some trick that was required for the original. Um, Use the fish was actually one of the more annoying levels to execute, as you'd expect. There's quite a bit of boosting here, and considering I haven't, tried to optimize in a while, um, or hadn't tried to in a while, I just had a really hard time getting the execution just right. Um, Unlike with microchips, when I did that, for this set, I was not concerned with getting optimal decimals. I was just concerned with getting the best second value I could. And in the end, the best second value I could was the best value I could route, which I did this all by hand in Super CC. But for all levels except for one, this is the best route that I could come up with, or the best time that I could come up with. And it's good. It's a good thing to think about. What level do you think I would be willing to leave a second on the table for? If you're well versed in CCLP2, then I think you probably already know. Um, but yeah, the early going in this set is a lot of really straightforward stuff. Deconstruction took a bit longer to find than I would have liked for how simple it is as well. And there, right there, that bomb was a perfect example of how little I cared about the optimal decimal and only cared about the second value. Because you had a spare move, so I used the spare move. The serial port was also one I remember being very annoying to actually execute. Like, there's just a lot of waiting on cycles here, and then that set of boosts with no spare moves, it's not hard. I'm just out of practice. So the parallel port is the first level I actually set a new record in over Bicorn. I gained 1 second on the previous record here, which I believe was just giving up, like not taking the suction boots. Debug file, mouse panel glitch 3 times. You needed all three. That was kind of annoying. Paw print aisle was another level where I gained 1 second. And this was really the first place where I questioned, do I actually want to execute all of these scores or just route them? And I was also thinking ahead to some later levels and wondering if I wanted to route those as well. But the answer turned out to be yes. I did go through every level, and I did execute every level, even though, again, Popper and Tile was kind of annoying due to being out of practice. And honestly, so was the timing on Double Trouble. I don't remember if there was a spare move on the route or not, but it was kind of an annoying level to do. So Elemental is just a straightforward maze. Um, So far, I've actually only gained 2 seconds. We are 18 levels in, and there's only been 2 seconds lost. Even a sample of things to come was, I believe, another. In fact, I know it was exactly the same. And yes, you did need that first RFF to go your way. The second one, there was some flexibility. You didn't need perfect luck just because the cycle would equalize a bit later. thankfully. Anywhere where perfect luck was needed was really annoying to go for. Again, CCLP2, people with a lot of CCLP2 knowledge are already thinking ahead to one level in particular with that. Wow, that was a really sloppy Ranger Denmark. So block away was another level where I managed to gain 1 second. I believe I did so on the toggle button, but again, I do not know exactly what routes were used for previous scores. I only know what I did. But managing that bottom section was something that took a little bit of effort to find how to do it correctly. How goes is just another maze level. There's nothing to optimize here. You literally just follow the path. Incredible. But this was what it was in CCLP2, and this is micro CCLP2. So a little bit on the set itself. It was a really fun set to go through and do this. Like I remembered really enjoying doing microchips, and this was, as you might expect, just a more involved version of microchips. I'm not sure I would do this again for another set like this, especially if the next one was for CCLP3 and on similar scales, being quite large. But who knows? Maybe. Um, I really can't predict what things I will feel like doing and what things I will find interesting because I wasn't so much planning on doing this set, and then I just did. Um, there was a spare move on sudden death, so it wasn't too bad. And so, race for the chips. This level is one that gets dramatically changed by being on a small, like in a smaller scale. And Bicorn's really good at managing teeth, so I was shocked to gain 2 seconds on that level. Like getting a 37 over 35. I did start with a 35 route, but I eventually just found a way to improve it and was like, wait, I can't believe that exists. Just the way to manage the teeth and have enough room was quite interesting to work on figuring out. We're going to have a bit of a drought of new records for a while. Madness 1 actually took a little bit to even figure out how to solve, but once I found it, it was very fast. Fire and water here has so many routes that all equalize. They are all exactly the same, and it's so annoying because you can see they're one move away from the next second. Like, those are the most annoying situations when optimizing. You exhaust every possibility and every single one comes up just short. Like, the best moments are when you find something and it wins. The worst are when you just can't because it doesn't exist. But again, honestly, the entire first quarter of this set is mostly very straightforward. I didn't gain time on a lot of early levels. We'll start picking up a lot later, a lot of levels where I managed to gain time. And not just a little bit of time, but some pretty significant time. Looking at the notes I have on the side, the most time I gained in any single level was 23 seconds. Teleportation is always one of those levels that's an interesting type of level to root. Anything with teleports and blocks is generally quite hard to wrap your head around and figure out what's really useful. Speaking of finding things that are useful, that toggle button is totally unnecessary, which when routing, I went and hit it first and then came up short and wondered what happened. There is an invisible wall protecting that red key, if I remember correctly. But we've now arrived at level 34, Cipher 2. This is another level I beat the record on. I gained 2 seconds here, and I'm not convinced this is optimal, but I tried quite a few variations of this first room, which is where most of the time would be, and this is the best that I found. The rest of the level is honestly extremely straightforward. Any weird movements here are avoiding invisible walls or going out of the way to pick up hidden things. It's just like the original. Even this section here with the X, there's just nothing to be done. And the last room, there's also nothing to be done. Um, like you have to hit the buttons in a specific order. You can't hit all the tank buttons first and hit the clone button on the way out. But I was able to gain 2 seconds. Mirror was one I remember being a little bit tricky. I don't even remember what it was that broke through. Just the first thing I tried, the first ordering, didn't really work. This is the kind of level I have never had the most fun working with because it just devolves into making sure you find the ideal cycle, and there's not really anything to it other than the cycle. Spy, just like the original, is a pure execution test. There's, it's just very simple pathing. I did choose my order of what chip, like what order to get certain chips in, to try to do the hardest parts up front and leave the harder parts, like you do the harder parts at first and leave the easier parts for later. I think I did a pretty decent job with that. It was either I was getting back into the swing of things, or this level really isn't that difficult. Mystery of the Seven Chips, just like the original, it's entirely about the correct sequencing through a series of teleports. That's it, that's the level. Just don't goof tank cycles like I did here, but it doesn't matter because this had more than enough spare time, and you do get a bit gated by the glider cycle. You still just get a 37. Mads Rush 1, I mean, it's Mads Rush 1. Um, I believe you could do a half weight before the ball on the ice, but I did a full weight. So Yike-O-Matic, I managed to gain 1 second. I believe it was in this teeth section at the start, but I was also willing to grind for a good enough RFF, which was annoying to do. Just because that ball cycle is so limiting. Um, yep. And now at this point, because you have flippers, you don't need to bring the block over. The fireball setups to just go. You just kind of have to wait and go through the pathway. Not not the hardest level. When I say I did this set entirely by hand in Super CC, that also includes in like finding the routes for these block pushing sections. I would put I would make my best effort and then I put them into Yask and then I would see how many moves I had available to save and then I would find those moves. Finding the moves is effectively the same as having a fully optimized score to work off of. Also, this is a bold +1. This beat the existing record. Ladder Needs a Wash was not optimal. Um, 32 is what you would get if you did not release the teeth. 32, 31, whatever the -1 would be. There's not a lot to talk about on so I'm just going to talk about Ladder Needs a Wash. And I tried a couple of different things on releasing the teeth and just ended up finding that it worked perfectly fine. Um, Also, if anybody else is going to use this video to optimize the set themselves, hitting the button there to clone the tank doesn't actually change much of anything. There's more than enough time to walk around it here and hit the button yourself at that point. As you can see, not hitting the button for the glider clone machine is, well, it's faster because you don't need to release the final fireball, but also it would be faster for the tank to delay it as well. Ray of Light, I mean, it's another nothing of a level. Man, CCLP2 kind of has a lot of these where you just kind of do the thing and there's not really options. Maybe we should bring back that style of level a little more. The just do something levels. Funhouse rank, I mean, it's Funhouse rank. There's very few inputs. It's mostly just about know what to do. Breaking the rules, you don't actually have to break the rules in this level, and the cycles work out such that you can just go straight through. So in that respect, it doesn't. That's really the first level I felt didn't really live up to the original in this set, which, considering we're almost a third of the way through, is I think saying quite a lot about the quality of what Josh Lee created here. And even then, it's almost incidental because one of the defining features of the original was the fact that you had to go out of sequence a little bit. Anyway, Telerooms, I gained 1 second here. Again, like many of these routes, I do not know where that second came from. It might have been just better management through those teleports. But ultimately, this level ended up having a fairly strict sequence of the order you had to do things, and then a little bit of luck with the blobs that start on ice here. Uh, this is also the last level in the first third of the set that I did gain any time in. So I've gained time in 8 levels so far, which I feel like that's pretty good, but that's 8 out of 50. And I said I gained time on 44. Well, I don't get anything on just a minute, which I feel like is unsurprising because you just kind of do the obvious block pushing twice. I experimented with different approaches to try to see if something was faster here, and there was nothing faster than just doing the same thing. Smorgasbord, again, I dabbled with trying to do something funky with the teeth, just to try to gain something and skip some of this item swapper maybe, or like multitask something with the item swapper, but it turned out to not be possible to do that. And so just like the original, in in the bottom left corner of the level, you just kind of get stalled for 30 seconds and there's nothing you can do but go back and forth. This level really does show, compared to Micro CC1, or Micro Chips, I should say, that this set definitely goes bigger on some of the levels. They still take up less space than the originals, but you also cannot really ignore that a level like Smorgasbord here is still taking up a large amount of space, and it's still lasting an entire minute. The Lake in Winter, there were no spare moves on this route, so it was kind of an annoying one to do because of the few sections of more precise timing. Again, I'm just relatively out of practice on seeing the visual cues. Oracle 1, this was actually a fun one to figure out. I do really enjoy piecing together a good block pushing route, just understanding everything about it and where you can, like what steps are required, where you can save time, how you can set things up. And this is ultimately a fairly simple one because the opening setup is actually fairly rigid. You need to do the same few moves to get things out of the way no matter what. I believe you could do a combined shuffle on these few blocks, and that would get you out in the exact same number of moves, but why overcomplicate things? So, security breach. This level was really hard to actually solve, but in the end, I managed to gain a second on the route here. Again, I don't really know how, but it took a lot of effort to even find a solution. That is so much harder than the original. Um, In contrast to finding the original levels route, Killer Rooms was shockingly free just because the cycles are so nasty and the beginning is so short that there were no tricks to do there. I really wanted this level to use the same trick as the original, but it just didn't. Um, Coming in one behind the ball like the original is nice though. Now we go to Dangers of Fire and Beasts. And this is a level the first level where I really have no idea what happened because I gained 6 seconds on this. I did test routes where you would clone teeth at the start and manage them later, but that it's cost too much time dealing with them. And there wasn't really anywhere to like get around them. You just had to deal with them the whole way through, which was slow. So yeah, I gained 6 seconds on Dangers of Fire and Beasts. Had a few chokes at the end, and then my keyboard or something lagged at the end, so I had that double oof and almost had to do it again. Anyway, moving on to Planet of the Teeth. The teeth really do get in the way of a lot of ideas here, but ultimately the cycles worked out really nicely and you could just very quickly finish. So quad boot, I also gained 1 second, and this took a few attempts, or quite a few, to try to execute. Um, Noticing you don't need suction boots is big. I'm pretty sure that one's just an execution gap, where maybe Bacorn did not root in Super CC or just decided not to grind it all out, and just settled for what he had. I, I don't know. I'm speculating. So by this point in the set, I was starting to see, especially after Dangers of Fire and Beasts, that there was the potential to gain an average of 1 second per level. And I gained 4 seconds on Lot of Danger. I did some testing on how much you needed in order to get out of the beginning, and I pause buffered the crap out of that beginning. It was so annoying. But here we are. And then the walkers didn't get in the way, fortunately. I knew my pace, fortunately. And on the last move, managed a 57 for +4. Um, for internal clock, somehow I gained 1 second. Not really sure where that came from. Anyway, around this point, let me look at my notes and figure out how many seconds I've gained up to this point. 5, another 5. I've gained 23 seconds through 60 levels. But it was somewhere around Dangers of Fire and Beast and Lot of Danger that I started wondering if it was possible to gain an average of 1 second per level. So 149 seconds. At this point, I'm way behind that pace, but there's a lot of levels to come. There's a lot of potential big gains to come. For all I knew, Bighorn had super heavily optimized things like Cloner's Maze, and I wasn't even going to be able to find the bolt route there, let alone improve it. A bit of a spoiler, I did improve that later. Icy Mote's just execution. But I was really, like, at this point, I had my eye on if that was possible to do. And I think I was aiming for it, but not expecting to get there. And I mean, if you've looked at the scoreboard, you'll know whether I made it there or not. But if you haven't, it's worth guessing right now if you think I found that much time. I also would have been pretty happy with 100 seconds, gaining or raising the maximum score by 1,000 points, which seemed to be a much more obtainable goal. Also, there's no other option for those blocks. You had to do that exact sequence. Um, Jungle, I tried really hard to go around the other way at first, and it just didn't work. And it's just a luck level with the blob cloner, but at least you don't need the blobs to interrupt the teeth. It's not that miserable of a grind. You just kind of, you actually do the same thing, and eventually it works. Loopholes, this took longer for me to find than it should have, but eh. So beware of the teeth. Weird level. Always a weird level. CCLP2 really does have a lot of these long ice slides. Even just releasing the paramecia doesn't really do anything. Yeah. I don't really have anything to add here other than okay, yeah, that was a 2 move wait to avoid having to time the wait on the ball, and then I forgot where to go and still got 30. So Hobgoblins and Chimera. This is actually a +1. I do not understand why, but it's a +1. As we continue on to the one sensible chip, I've now gained time on 14 levels, and there's a lot left to gain time on. But at the time I'm optimizing this, which I optimized all these levels over the course of a week. I believe I said that, but I feel like that bears repeating. I really didn't have a sense for how strong the times on some of the more involved levels were. Some of the gains were clearly just, yeah, I mean, I guess there's something, but some of them were also a lot more just missing something very silly. But again, sometimes you do just miss something very silly in a route. Like, I had so many moments of missing something very silly, and the only reason I realized that I did miss something silly is because I had the Corn's benchmark time to look back at and compare to, and just see that there was room for improvement. Anyway, here's Madness 2. Madness 2 I gained 3 seconds on, and this actually took a pretty significant amount of effort. So there's a half weight, there's another half weight, and another one, and another one. And then you still have to win a coin toss there in order to make this cycle and have enough chips. Um, there were some small variations on this level that would come up just a little short or lose time later. And I'm not surprised that time was missed here. I believe I had a +1, and then I kept going to get the +3. This was +3, right? Yeah. Uh, so in terms of levels where I missed something silly on my first pass, and I had to go check the existing record to see just what the target was, so many chips. My first route was actually not a 62, despite it being a .8. Killer Spiral, I don't recall there being any tricks here. There were plenty of things you could potentially try, but you have no way to influence the gliders, and you end up just being completely gated by the gliders at the socket path. There was no way to get past them any faster than this due to that unavoidable bounce back, and so 28 was very cleanly optimal. Uh, let's see, what kind of level was Mad's Rush 2? Was this an RFF grind level? I think this was one of the RFF levels. Yeah, I mean, you did not need particularly good luck here. And I checked what perfect luck would get you, and perfect luck would not gain you another second, so there's a 19. So I gained 3 seconds on checkerboard 2, and this was something where I had an early route that did reach bold, but it still had things that I felt were pretty weird about it. And it just felt like there was some way of improving this bottom section, or just managing the blocks in this top section. So I kept pushing at it, and I eventually found this sequence of events, this ordering, that it did lead to an even larger record where I gained 3 seconds. And the interesting thing about this is just how much gets left behind. I had some other ideas involving being able to take the chip in the middle of that bottom room as part of going like from the left entrance to the room to the right entrance to the room, but it ended up not panning out in practice. So one of the other improvements I found late was getting that red key later as part of this process, and also being able to come in through the top fire socket. And as you can see, 134, bold +3. This is the kind of level where I would expect there to be time to gain. And I would honestly not be surprised if there was even time to gain on what I just showed you. There was a bit of a dry spell on records from here. There just wasn't a lot of potential room for improvement. The next few levels are all conceptually pretty simple. No, yeah, Bumble Boy, there's not really anything you could do there. Chip Search, just this one, just like the original, is actually pretty rigid about what you can and cannot do. Anything I'm not collecting is trapped, so if you tried to get it, you just can't. It doesn't let you. You die, or you don't even die, you just are stuck in a trap. And so, route-wise, this was very much the only thing you could do. Moving on to Buggy Wall. I think I did this one in a voice call with people in a Toho community. They didn't know I was doing this. I was just hanging out and doing this on the side. Um, Really, it's just wait, and you wait more, and then just loop around. And no matter which way you go, you have to enter the final bug room. So, I mean, I guess 28 on Buggy Wall. Um, Actually, one sec. Sometimes you only see things when watching it back. What keys did I use? Okay, the red key was on the way. I thought for a moment there was a way to avoid one of the keys and gain time that way. But I guess even with the decimal, it would still have been a 28. A lot of bug levels in quick succession in this, in CCLP2. Firebugs, very straightforward. Mad Maze. I actually think this is one of the strongest records that Bacorn set. Um, Getting through the RFF room on pace was not terribly difficult, but just finding a way to manage the rest of this level was surprisingly annoying because there was no way to deal with all of these gliders. You just kind of had to deal with them all for the entire level. And that forced a very rigid structure through this ending part, which you also had to wait on due to the fire boots being in the lower section. But the gliders ended up not really being a problem in this sequencing that I found, and I'm very impressed with that one. So the search for the exit. This is one of those levels where I really wanted to do the same trick that was in CCLP2 and use the teeth to erase a buried trap, but it ended up not panning out. And despite that, I still ended up gaining 5 seconds. Like I really don't know where that came from. But maybe because it's not just one cycle on that paramecia. Like I genuinely do not know where that time came from. Because this paramecia that we're currently looking at is on a 16 move cycle. And if that's the limiting factor in your route, you would gain 3 seconds and then 6 seconds, and possibly one additional second, depending on where the second boundary falls. So the fact that I gained 5 specifically tells me that something weird was done. Speaking of levels where something weird is done, this is 2 seconds faster. A lot of off-screen timing and button manipulation to align, like just to get as many fireballs going as possible, and then make sure the toggle is lined up correctly. Frost Swirl, man, this is one of my least favorite kinds of levels to optimize. You just kind of try the ordering and see if it works, and because of the cycles, you can't even think the ordering is going to be good before you do it. The only way to know if the ordering is going to be any good is to actually try the ordering, and there's still no way around long waits like that one. I tried basically everything, and this was the only thing that was any good. Um, Just Enough is another level that I think lost a little bit just a tiny bit of the puzzle from the original, just because you are limited instead of 4 blocks or seeming like you need 4 blocks, you have three. Here it seems like you need three and you have two, but maybe that's just because I already know the answer. And in terms of already knowing the answer, the trick used at the end is also the same trick that you would use in the original, erasing that thin wall using the block, because it's suction boots on thin wall. So if you try to go in there, the thin wall blocks you. But if you push a block on it, it tries to become block suction boots thin wall. Only 2 layers are stored, and so you can just kind of do it. Like it forgets the third layer. So the block stops here. I don't know how, but this is a 4-second bolt improvement. I do not know where 4 seconds come from, because my first route was faster, but then somehow I gained more time on top of that. I don't know. That's another one of those big question marks. So at this point, I think I'm averaging about 1 second gained every 2 levels, and there's not really anything to talk about with Warehouse 1. This is just the optimal route. There's not really any flexibility here. I remember there were no spare moves on this. You just kind of clear things out. You can do it in a lot of different orders. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself that, this is a lot of fun, but man, I think that 1 second every level average is not going to happen. Um, like even though I had those big improvements, like that +6 on Danger of Fire and Beasts, that's the kind of oversight that you just can't count on. You can't calculate for. And yeah, I gained 4 seconds on I think Lot of Danger is 59. But that's a lot of danger. Like, would Bicorn really have grinded out perfect luck or figured out what perfect luck would even get you? But, like, so I kind of rescaled down to trying to save 100 seconds. I think by this point I was approaching halfway there, just because I had a couple of bigger gains, but I really didn't know. Crypts of Aganerak. I mean, it's a level. There's nothing to it, really. You just kind of do things in the obvious order that the level presents to you, and each subroom doesn't have any way to really gain or lose time, aside from obviously bumping into blue walls or getting stopped by walkers here, which I think I pause buffered along that path just in case. You just pick the right path at the end. So in a shocking twist, follow the Glacier Brick Road. I gained a second on this level. I could not tell you where, because this is a level where there are absolutely no choices. The only way you lose time is on execution, and Bicorn is a very skilled player. So when I routed this and found 41 instead of 40, it was a huge shock. And like it almost re-inspired that maybe that dream of gaining a second per level, maybe it's not just a dream. If there's going to be seconds like that on the table, who's to say there's not some massive improvement on the table somewhere later? And as I said, I found a significant 23-second gain later on. Speaking of gains where you might not expect them, this is a +2, which I think that's really surprising because on a first impression here, there were no options, but you could skip getting the yellow key. I think that was the thing that gave it to me. Yeah, at this point, it's just managing the cycle as is. Um, the thing that kind of gates you is that glider. I think this was a point O to point or a point 8 to point O route. Oh, I guess it wasn't. Anyway, that was +2. The walker machine. I think I did this one in the span of like 3 minutes, just while waiting for something else to happen. This might have been a break from work while my code was compiling or something. Or no, I was waiting for a build to happen, and I just went and did a level because it was a really easy level. Don't get lost. I wanted there to be something you could do in this level. I wanted there to be something you could do so badly. And I tried everything I could to circumvent the order and take advantage of the fact that some of these blocks are placed, or your teleports don't immediately force you somewhere else, but I couldn't find anything. You really do have to just follow this single path and just wait when you have to wait. And there was nothing. And so it's a very boring 53. Ghetto Defender. In terms of silly oversights I made, I was getting the green key at first. You don't need the green key for anything. There are no green locks in this level. Oops. Once I realized that, it was very easy bowl to find. Marjorlane's maze? No, this one was weird. I think I really don't know what I was thinking, but my first two routes here were all pretty bad. Like, it's another level where you don't need the green key. You can't go that way with the skates, by the way. The ball is bouncing on ice, even if you can't see it. Like, my first few macro orderings were very poor. And even the micro orderings on how to manage the teleports at the end were difficult to figure out. Anyway, Tutti Frutti is fortunately, significantly shorter than its original version. Like, the original is over 4 minutes of just walking through hallways. This is a little better. It has the same thing with the glider cycle, too, where the ideal is that you can use the teleport as a shortcut at the end. Um, and just like the original as well, there are a few different orders you can do the item swapping here, but this is by far the best one. It has less backtracking. There's just nothing else to consider. I still considered everything else first. Yep, forced wait of that long. And now we get to Abandoned Mines. This route is 5 seconds faster than what Bacorn scored, and I honestly do not blame him. This level, grinding the luck on that blob, then having to get perfect execution on this, miserable grind. But I did it because at this point I was not willing to leave any seconds on the table. And I gained 4 very quickly because it's not hard to lose a second in that force floor room. It's very hard to get every move. And that's really where I started looking ahead as well. Not to see where there was time to save, but because I was beginning to get curious if there were any levels I wasn't going to want to push for every second on. And yeah, I found one. I found one depending on how things aligned. And I'll say it now. It was Keep Trying, which I think is not a surprise. Checkerboard 2, I found 2 extra seconds here. Uh, Unlike other levels where there was a notable trick you could pull, this was a level where I really didn't even want to consider the trick that the original level uses. So the main thing I did was just make the toggles flip every single move because it was much faster to go through. And then aside from that is just making sure the toggles are in the state that you want and ending with this section down here because you don't need to block off the path to the exit. Learn, I mean, it's the same as learn. Um, is the font on that A the same? I don't think it is. I don't think it is. Um, the original level has this cool thing where when you teleport, it looks like it didn't move, but here it does look like it moved. Oh well. Glider and Fire. This is a level where I found one additional second, and if you've been paying attention, you might have noticed that as soon as we hit about level 66, these records have become a little more numerous. And even 78, I've started gaining time on a lot of levels in a row. Or not all in a row, but a lot more levels. I tried doing this in the more standard order first, where you'd go basically just left to right, and that turned out to be good, but it didn't feel optimal to me. So I spent a little while playing around with different orderings, and especially different ways of managing the blocks at the start, and I found this way that gained 1 second. So roller coaster. Again, I don't know where the time came from. Maybe just Bighorn not being willing to grind out the luck like I was. But this is 3 seconds faster. And that oof is not a planned wait. I would have needed it anyway for the blob, but really, I knew there was some spare time on this route. You could afford to lose moves, and so I wasn't stressed over every single move. So yeah, this is a 3 second gain, and it's one of the most weird 3 second gains. I remember there was a moment where I thought I had a significantly larger gain, um, with just some big reordering that skipped a large amount of the level, but that turned out to not work because you couldn't get out of the teleports. So that is perfect luck on the walker. Just gets out of the way both times, no additional risk. You just know it's going to work. I think I needed to get to that point on pace twice before I didn't screw up. I'm a little, like I said, I was getting better, but I was still a little out of practice. And especially out of practice at remembering and executing some of these longer routes. Like if you had told me that I had to go do, I don't know, investment right now, I would not be able to do that because I'm just that out of practice. Move on to loop. Like Mad's Rush 2, this level is kind of defined by its random force floor sequence. Um, I believe just like Micro Mad's Rush 2, the luck wasn't really a huge factor here. Yeah, because it's much more likely you can just get through. You have to wait for 2 moves on the ball, so you can spend those 2 moves you'd have to wait anyway to set the toggles to the correct state, and then you just need a single RFF push to the right. And as you can see, there's even spare moves on that. So another shocking time gain. I gained 1 second on one block Sokoban, and that really surprised me because this is another one of those levels where it doesn't really feel like there are any options. You just kind of have to do the same block erase trick a few times in a row. So at this point, there just started being a lot more time available. And with there being a lot more time available to gain, and especially coming up pretty soon, um, I was just really hopeful that there would be enough. Oh, actually, you know what it is? I think that the error was a really, really simple one. There's more chips in the level than you need, and so you don't need to get everything behind the green lock here. So you can save 4 moves, and yeah, that would be a second. Like, that's the kind of thing you have to pay attention to, the chip counter. Torch is cycles. Deliberately waiting 2 moves there, even though you don't need to. sets up much better cycles for the ending. And as you can see, you just kind of make it no problem for 45. So hard as rock, I also gained 1 second here, which was kind of an annoying second because this level is so close to so much more, but there's just no way around this start. And so what I ended up realizing was that the limiting factor at the end ends up being when the trap button is hit and making sure the trap button is hit at a good time for you. And while you can not mess with the cycle, it's better if you do. So not really any way around dealing with the blob there. And as you can see, it's a no move weight at the trap with the disruption. So Chip is fight. Um, this is a much simpler level than it might appear. There's not really, like a lot of the CCLP2 levels, there's not really any variation you can do in the structure. There's not really any tricks you can do in how you execute that structure. It's just a very simple, straightforward level. Even right there, I found that if you just do a one move weight, the slide delay works out and you just intercept the block. So no half move weights, no difficult execution, it just works. And even here, no weight, two move weight and another weight, and you just go through. I've gone through that kind of section enough times, I understand it. And then you don't have to wait on this ball, so even if there was time to save, that ball was kind of a limiting factor for you. And so we arrive at island hopping. This is a 23-second gain. And this is the kind of level where you might expect there to be a gain of that size, because there is the potential, just like in the original level, to break a bit of the intended sequence. You can do a big block bridge extending down to clear out some of the bombs yourself, or you can do what I do here, and instead use the blocks to disrupt the gliders. And what I realized is that if you push a block across that trap, this will actually make both gliders leave and gives you enough time to remove the chip. Because you only care about the second glider. This was not the first thing I tried, and not the first thing I tried even after I'd already broken the record. But once I hit on that idea, it was very clearly the best. And the rest of the ordering lended itself to a 119. I believe since the limiting factor is the gliders, there's not really any way to improve that. I tried things with a collision. You'd have to get there almost 6 moves faster, and the pink ball kind of prevents that from happening. So plus 23. And after gaining 23 seconds in a single level, I was all of a sudden very, very close to being on pace to saving an average of 1 second per level. The potential for that was now back on the table. And gaining 100 seconds, that was basically guaranteed by this point. So Pyramid was a straightforward level, no tricks here, aside from just the way I measured the weight and walking around the long ways to get a good cycle. Yet another puzzle I gained 3 seconds on. And again, I'm not really sure where that came from. I just kind of did the thing that seemed like it made the most sense down here in the sardine can and tried to order this block as best I could. Um, you also needed to manage the glider cycle, so that's why the ordering is what I did here. It might seem better to deal with another block first or have pushed the block out first, but this was what gave the best cycle. And you have to send the glider down just like in the original level, because these are all water bomb. But just like the other second layer erasing tricks, you can make it, as soon as the glider steps on it, it becomes glider water bomb. The third layer doesn't exist, and I got a 144 for plus 3 seconds. Now, bounce was an annoying level to do. It's such a simple route, but it took me so long to find that. Also, that was a bold +1. A level that short had a missing second, which was a massive shock when I found it. Like, I did not expect Joyride 1 to be suboptimal. I would never expect that, especially given that I found nothing in levels like tricks. Um, and there really was nothing to do in this level. And yet, even though there's nothing to do, finding the exact right ordering, the exact right way of handling everything, what you need, was not simple. So blocked trap, I gained 7 seconds with this route. This is one that was a lot of just trials of different things, and this was just what turned out to be the best. Just a very simple clone exactly enough gliders and have it hit the tank button. No chaos, nothing fancy, and just a very convenient cycle at the end. So now we're going to go into a bit of a dry spell, where the levels are all straightforward enough there was nothing to do. And even though I was on a bit of a hot streak of gaining a lot of time, like if we look at the the 100s decade, I beat the record on 5 of those levels, and I gained 35 seconds. But in the next 5 levels after that, I gained nothing. So not knowing how good the records are, which you never really know until you try, was a bit of a it's so over, we're so back in terms of potentially hitting those dream targets of saving that much time per level. After the rainstorm was again, it's just nothing. It's like Monster Factory. You just do the route. Except this one, I actually missed a trick the first 2 times I went through, and it's one where I absolutely would have come up short. Even though the trick is just doing that setup. Like, that's all you had to do. That was it. You don't have to go through the upper section with the force floors twice. You do in the original level, and you have to do a ram in the original level, but you don't have to do it here. So, this is one where I got stuck on the original idea and came up short for a while. Yeah, Ortogeld 2, I don't think there were any tricks you could do. I don't think there was anything you could really do. Joyride 2, so the fact that this was optimal and Joyride 1 wasn't is shocking. So counterclockwise, once you do those weights at the start, the cycles are all set up so there's no more waiting. It's very convenient in that regard, but again, because of that initial wait, there's nothing else you can do. And I did try other things, but those other things all equalized. And here we have turn, turn, turn. This, in the original set, is one of the most intricate and complicated cycle routing levels in the entire game. And the micro version is on a similar level of kind of setting things up, but it's much smaller scale, much simpler. This is a bold +9 route, so I gained 9 seconds. I know it might not look like much, but I spent a lot of time dealing with different cycles, making sure the teeth didn't come out, checking different boost patterns on the hidden ice, and eventually I did find that, which was a big gain. It was, I think, the 4th or 5th finished route that I had. Circle Maze, easy one. And now we have a level that is, I'm pretty sure, busted, and I'm pretty sure that this was not a previously known bust. The entire top left of this level contains no chips. It's totally unnecessary. And so by exploiting that fact, and just dealing with this boot section effectively, and ignoring 2 puzzles, I got a new record by 13 seconds. Which is, again, not the first thing I tried. Here we have teeth, which did not have any time to gain. Fortunately, the random force floors were skippable with the way the teleports were laid out. Thank you for I want to say making that mistake, but it may have been on purpose. That would have been miserable to go for a 1 in 64. Except it's actually worse than a 1 in 64 because it's a 1 in 64 and a 9 in 16 all together to get the perfect time. So it's actually more of about a 1 in 120. The original Teeth is fortunately very lenient with its route. Frost Ring's nothing to gain here. Flame Boy, this is a level where it's just do the bust. One try. Now, Warehouse 2, I appreciate being significantly shortened, but it's still longer than it needed to be, which, is Warehouse 2. I do love the motif of needing to set up a room so that you can pass through it later, and I appreciate there not being an especially tedious implementation of that, but it's still a level based on Warehouse 2, which is one of my least favorite official levels. So this actually only gains 1 second. This is another one of those levels where I'm sure there's time to be gained. Like there's a huge wait there, for instance. But even if there is time to be gained, I was not interested in trying more variations at the start. I tried quite a few variations at the start. I think what I did had two half weights in the end, but I didn't really pay close attention, and I'm not bothered to go back. So if you want to find out, go back for yourself. Anyway, Paramecia is one of those kind of really irritating cycle levels where you just have to wait a bunch of times and figure out the best cycles. And you can't even use the teleport as a shortcut here. Like, it's so rude. So we're just going to continue the streak of levels where there was nothing going on that really started making me question the 149 dream. Because saving 100 seconds had already happened by this point. But 149 was still pretty far out. Um, and I was going entirely in order, so I did not know what the rest of the set had in store for me. But this is Blocks and Bombs. This is one of my favorite levels in the original CCLP2, and the route here was also pretty cool. Um, you do have to be a little careful with the cycles, but ultimately, it's a level. Dodge, you just walk through. That's it. That's the whole thing. So it makes sense there was nothing to do here. Escape from Chipcatraz. I thought I improved this one, actually. Have I been giving misinformation? Let me check on PyGuy's site. 127, no, yeah. I did find this route quite quickly, and I found some other ideas that seemed promising, but I guess this block setup was just it. Yeah, no. I mean, it's not surprising Bicorn had Chipcatraz, seeing as Bicorn was the one who confirmed Chipcatraz in the original CCLP2. So Fantasy Island, I just looked at to see how many moves you would have to waste on chip pickups, found a route, saw that you could waste one there, and it was good enough. Moving on. Miscellaneous, you just do the bust. I found another way of doing the bust, but it was equivalent. Frozen Bird Bath, it's a short level. There's nothing to do. So at this point, we have 19 levels remaining, and I was running out of places to gain time. But Time Bomb turned out to be one of them. This level actually took me quite a while to solve once, even. And that might be a little surprising, but you have so much less to work with than the original level that even knowing the trick for the original, this version is not easy to figure out how to finagle. And there are a few different ways you can do it, even. But what I ended up doing involved using the flippers to help with a misdirect at first, and then using that to buy time for later and use the flippers again. And this ended up gaining 3 seconds over Bicorn, according to my notes. Yeah, 3 seconds. Captured, I checked how many times you would need to mouse click and did only the ones that would save time, which has been none of them so far. Still none of them, but you do need that one. So I was happy to find a one-click route there. Block maze, I mean, it's block maze. What are you gonna do? You're just gonna go through the block maze? Uh, yeah, there was... This Paramecium room is so neutered compared to the original that there's just nothing to even try for. It's just... Everything here is so simple. Um, Even the hidden ice there, if you just know it's there, you just treat it like it's an ice tile. Yeah. Even here, no trick to do. You just kind of push the block. When I'm saying there's no trick, that's not at all a slight on the level itself in any way. It's just more of a comment on what it is I'm playing and what it is I'm trying to optimize. Not every level is a good optimization experience, and ultimately a lot of these straightforward levels are fine on their own and they're good practice. But in the context of trying to push an entire set, they do end up feeling a lot like filler. What didn't feel like filler was Zartakla, which was another level where I would not have had the record or found this route if I was not trying to match an existing time. Like this level was really weird. There are invisible walls in this room, so you have to go around exactly that way. There's no way around it. The yellow key, I think you never end up needing. Yeah. And then it mostly just came down to getting a good enough cycle at the fireballs and not getting blocked by the bug. Switch hit, I really wanted there to be some time save you could do, some reordering time save, but I couldn't find one. So I ended up only getting a confirm on this level. Which, I mean, I say only getting a confirm, but really at this point, I knew I was in the home stretch. I knew keep trying was going to be a huge pain, and I was looking forward to basically everything after keep trying. So I'd actually decided at this point that I was going to skip keep trying and come back to it at the end. I'm not going to do that here. Actually, I think that's what I did. I skipped keep trying. No, I did keep trying, but I didn't grind it very hard, and I was going to figure out how hard I needed to push at it uh, to hit some goal target, depending on what I could find on other levels. Right, right. It was Cloner's Maze I had decided I was going to save. Also, the fact that this fireball cycle works out is so convenient. Um, in terms of levels that were the most irritating to root in this entire thing, Patrolled outright wins. This was so annoying because there are so many different orders you could try, so many different ways that it manipulates the tanks or doesn't, so many different times you could try to wait. It was just, and the fact that the tanks get in your way at the end so often, I tried reasoning through this, but really it was just a bit of luck picking a good order, and then just figuring out if there were places I could delay to make it through a tank cycle like there, and I confirmed it. So Frostbite, I gained 1 second here, which I believe was a result of just a better way of handling the middle because there's not really any other options for the sides here. And it had to be done in this order because of the teeth in the middle. So I will show keep trying here, which is a +4. The execution at the beginning doesn't matter a ton because you are stuck waiting on this ball cycle quite a bit if you're on perfect pace. So because of that, I wasn't concerned with being perfect, which made grinding this much nicer than it otherwise might be. And there's not really anything you can do to get past here faster. But you can already see, if you know this level, you know it's a random force floor level. I do not know if pushing that to the side is optimal, but here's what I got. Which I got pretty lucky at the end there. Noted my timing, and I knew that I wouldn't beat the first tank cycle with that ending. And so I did the adjustment that I knew of pushing the block in. So at this point, I know I'm actually on pretty good pace. And if I win those two 1 and 4s at the end, I get a 99. And 99 is actually what my optimal route was, assuming perfect luck. So given that it was reasonable to get a route with that tank cycle and be reliant on two 1 and 4s at the end to get a 1 and 16 at the end, this second is actually reasonable to go for. I just really don't want to. And after putting this out, I fully expect someone like Sharp Eye to come in and snipe that and just get that 99, or maybe even find a way to push it to 100. I don't think I will be returning to this set, even if records are beaten. I did what I wanted to with it, and I'm quite happy with what I've done with it. So if somebody wants to come along and find improvements, heck, if they want to come in and use Melinda Router or some automated tool that I still think takes a lot of the fun out of this, they're welcome to. I can't stop you, and in fact, I would be very interested, I guess, to find out where I have missed time. Even if I currently don't intend to go back and look for it, who knows? Maybe I missed time on a level I found interesting. It could, like, I don't know. We'll find out. Anyway, Oracle 2 is an extremely straightforward level. There are a couple block pushing tricks that make things a little faster, but ultimately, like, this was enough to gain 1 second over Bicorn. Chomper Romp is one of those mystery time gains. This is +5, and there's actually a funny thing about this being +5. I was reading the wrong row for what the time was, and so I was trying to match a time on a different level. And I kept looking, and I actually did find something in the center at the end. So I'd already had +2, but I thought I was -2 or something. And no, I ended up, as a result of that, just finding something better. But I may have found it anyway because the middle section before had a kind of awkward weight in it. We love side swipes. One move weight there. Loop around. You can see that the teeth is already in position and you don't really have to wait. So trapped, you just do the bust. It's blob controller boss, just like the original. Wormwood. This level was really sad because I wanted there to be a way to do the bust, but there's just not enough room in the chip room, and so you have to do the slow intended solution. And I did gain 1 second on the existing route here on this, but it was just sad. This level is almost so cool, but it ends up just being kind of lame. And this is not because of the level, it's just because the CCLP2 version has such a good trick, and that trick just wasn't possible here. I was looking forward to trying to figure that out, but it just didn't work out. There's no way to do so. And with that, there's actually only 5 levels remaining. So unlike unlike Wormwood, Gauntlet does have a trick in the original level that was not used in the micro version that could be used. And that is the Walker collision at the end. So you're going to see a Walker collision here. There you go, Gauntlet. Run Amok Original is one of my least favorite levels ever. Um, and this one was optimized perfectly. This is the last level I did not have any improvements on. And by this point, I have gained 130 seconds. So remember, my target was, well, potential for 131. My target was to gain 149 after reaching 100 pretty handily with those two big gains back on island hopping and high security. But there was a bit of a dry spell through the 120s and 130s. Not a lot to gain there. So with only 3 levels left, would I be able to make up that much more time? Now those 3 levels are Cloner's Maze, which is always complicated. Maybe there's something you can do. Neptune, which again, there's some cloning shenanigans. Maybe there's something you can do. And Key Color, which, well, it's Key Color. Surely there's something there. And I did find something in all 3 of these levels. Now, Cloner's Maze here, I went through several iterations trying to find ways to double up time. Save a couple moves on when I pick things up, try to do things during periods I would otherwise have to wait, and I'm sure this is improvable. But this is what I came up with, and I'm proud of this route. I am proud of this sequencing. I'm going to be ending the route in the top left, and most of this level is just based around managing this first series of this glider cloner and these first traps. I'm just trying to double up as many things as possible so I don't have to go through this long cycle of clone a glider and release that glider from the trap up at the top. Just so I can minimize the number of times I have to do that. And then by extension, minimize the number of times I need to use a fireball. So I need to get a fireball stuck in the trap above here so that it can come back down later. And again, I'm still ignoring that one chip. And I'm ignoring that one chip because I can pick it up for free during a wait later. Right here. I'm now waiting on a fireball. And I've arranged the cycles such that a fireball will go up. Now there's a fireball going around the entire outside of the level. So now, and only now, do I do the top left section. Get the tank out of the way of the exit. Get this into the red key. Let's deal with everything else. Now it's just picking up the chips that I've cleared with all of the effort from later. Or from earlier, sorry. And that is Cloner's Maze in bold plus 23. I made it. Now there's only 2 levels remaining. They are Neptune and Key Color. I spent a decent amount of time dabbling with different ideas for Neptune to try to find one that would give me a good tank cycle. I'm sure there's a better one, but I found this pretty quick, and it ended up working out pretty nicely on the toggle side too, so we'll take it. Yeah, very minimal waiting. This was a B plus 5. And with that, we are on the final level of Micro CCLP2, Key Color. This is a bold plus 2 route. I gained 2 seconds, and I'm not really sure where those 2 seconds came from. It might have been dealing with the bugs, but it could be anything with a level like this. I've routed Key Color. I've routed Feeble Existence from Never Stop Gaming. And honestly, I think this was the simplest of the 3, which you'd expect because it's the smallest. But, what do you really expect? It was a fun level. Like I said earlier, this was a really fun set, and I'm glad I went through this process. Um, I did report a 96 on Keep Trying at first, if I remember right, which was 2 seconds slower than what I showed here. And then after I finished Key Color, I went and got 2 more seconds to take it to 160 gain seconds instead of 158, because there was the potential to go for a nice round number, and to see how bad it was to try to improve Keep Trying, with a little more knowledge of how the cycles would work out in practice. Yes, that yellow key is totally unnecessary, and with a good entry cycle here, you don't have to wait on any of this. And with that, that is the entirety of Josh Lee's Micro CCLP2 Optimized. Currently all bolds. I think after I upload this, that won't last. Thank you for watching. This was a lot of fun to play. This was a lot of fun to look back on now, a month after I did it. And see you next time.